But the Democrats controlling the Property Tax Relief Task Force, first deadline that came up in October, they missed it. Critical deadline that came up in December, they blew it. And when you look at what they presented, the draft, you have to ask yourself, are these Democrats serious about property tax reform? I suggest they are not.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining Jeff and I on the first episode of this weekly look at the major issues for 2020. And Jeff, it's actually been, for what should be a quiet period of time, pretty revealing of some of the major issues that are working their way through. The task force on property taxes one. Well, we're also going to be taking a look at what's going on with this whole situation about Speaker Madigan, and will he be able to remain as the Speaker of the House?
And then, of course, then there's marijuana, there's the Senate president election, and then Donald Trump. Donald Trump is always dominating everything, right?
Well, that's right.
Even state and local.
And that's also at the national level, too big to ignore. So while you and I normally focus on state and local issues, we're going to have to take a bit of a look at some of the big stuff that's going on around the nation. But let's start off with this task force. It was, everyone knows the property taxes in Illinois are so high. The governor put together a task force to look at that. They were supposed to have their report, as Representative Mazzocchi said, at the end of the year. They didn't make that deadline, but then when they did come in, the Republicans said that they really didn't bring much to the table as far as reforms.
Well, the Republicans seem to have found some spine after collaborating with the Democrats on the budget and gotten up not much last year. Seems like they came out fighting this year. And look, they picked a good item because property taxes are a big deal. They're a big deal if you own a home, because it's a good chunk of what you pay for home ownership aside from your principal and mortgage. And if you're renting, implicitly that property tax is in there affecting your rental price. And a large part of that property tax is education, and a large part of education is pensions. So you would think if you're going to reform or provide for relief of property taxes, well, then you got to do something about cutting pension benefits, which is a real problem in Illinois, but you got to work on it. Cutting pension benefits that have already essentially accrued. You got to do what the Constitution doesn't allow you to do. Okay, and in addition to do that, you got to do something about the collective bargaining agreements that basically control how teachers' contracts are negotiated, how local police and fire contracts are negotiated.
Well, the Republicans...
They didn't do any of that. They didn't do any of that. And in large part, what I just said is what House Republican Leader Durkin was saying and Representative Mazzocchi was saying.
Well, let's listen to what she had to say. We got another bite from her from the press conference they had earlier this week.
Now, one of these issues affecting property taxes is the skyrocketing number of new unfunded mandates. Since 1992, the Illinois General Assembly has passed 220 mandates impacting school districts. I've talked to my administrators, I've talked to my faculty members. They don't want them, they don't need them, they don't think they bring value to the educational experience. But that's 7.5 unfunded mandates a year that the schools have to pay for, and they pass those costs on to homeowners. Now, a few years ago, there was a local government consolidation and school mandates task force. They finished their work December 31st, 2015. What happened to those recommendations? Democrats ignored them. Nothing's been done to slow down the number of mandates we're forcing on our school districts.
So Mazzocchi and the Republicans would say this was a big nothing burger, bunch of fluff and just another empty commission, so that the Democrats will have an excuse to say they did something while doing nothing. At least that's the allegation and the indictment the Republicans are throwing at the Democrats.
Well, that's part of it. And, mandates are something, but they're really often overplayed by Republicans. I don't know why. They're just not a very large chunk of that local spending or the factor that explains for local property taxes being so high. And part of what the task force is recommending here, not a way to cut local costs, a way to expand more revenue, raise the expand the sales tax to cover some services. But maybe Mary Flowers wants to say, don't use the property tax at all to pay for education. Do it all on the state level. So that ain't going to happen, number one, because you couldn't expand the state level that much, and implicitly you'd be giving up more local control than you want. So look, a lot of that task force, part of the problem was there are too many members, 88, half of the General Assembly. Why don't you just call it the General Assembly? You don't even need a task force. You can just convene the whole General Assembly. That's number one. But number two, you get people, they get so focused on, like, how do we assess? And are assessments racially biased? All of those things may be things to focus on, but they're not the big picture. Pensions, education costs, collective bargaining, don't expand taxes. How would that be for a top four, right?
You know, this is where I would say to the viewers and all the people that if the people of Illinois make a big stink about this, then it doesn't really matter what the task force says. The governor will get the idea, the lawmakers will get the idea, and you have to demand some change. And it seems to me we're getting to the point when we have 105,000 people move out of the state, and we just had I saw a graphic recently from our friends at WirePoint that over the last, or since 2010, there's only 9 counties out of 102 that didn't lose population. So this is widespread across the state, and it's going to have to be. It seems like they're about to come out with the pitchforks, and the people are going to have to, because the representatives will respond to that. Otherwise, if there's no big stink made by the voters, especially in this election year, then they have no real purpose to take on the property tax fight, because it'll be a fight to make significant changes.
Well, look, if you're a representative or a senator, the thing that scares you a lot, you could lose your post, lose your office. And if you're a Democrat these days, they're often more afraid of losing in a primary election than they are in a general election.
Right.
Maybe the same for the Republicans.
Right, with the redistricting.
So one thing the Republicans have to do, I think, they got to get a clear message. We're kind of helping them here. We're not biased. We're not for the Republicans, but you and I probably agree a two-party system is good, a healthy two-party system. If you only have one party in the state, you have no competition, you have no clash of ideas. And that's kind of what's been happening. So the Republican Party to get revitalized to provide that clash of ideas, that competition.
The property tax seems to me to be a great issue to champion, because everyone in every county of the state is feeling the pain every time they have to write that property check on their homes. But Jeff, let's move along, because another major issue happening as we speak, and seems like a dribble that's been building up to a crescendo, is the whole idea that this investigation, and WBEZ out of Chicago has done great work in getting the FOIA requests, and that turned up an email from former lobbyist Mike McLean, who's very close to the Speaker. There we have the comment here, and what stirred it is, as we see in yellow, McLean wrote trying to ask for a fellow Forrest Ashby to hold on to a job. He says this man is a good compliance person. The AG's office and the sheriff's love working with them. But here's the key one. The sentence, he kept his mouth shut on Jones's ghost workers, the rape in Champaign, and other items. He is loyal to the administration at that time being the administration of Pat Quinn. And now everyone is saying, what in the heck is going on? What is this? A rape in Champaign, and you guys are proud of the fact that you have members of your inner circle, good people who are covering up ghost workers, who are covering up apparently a rape. So now we don't know where that stands as far as investigating it. We have different people, Senate President, outgoing Senate President Cullerton, or I guess he's maybe ex-president now, is saying that the state's attorney of Champaign County ought to be the one to investigate that. But I'm sure we haven't heard the last of it, Jeff.
Right. We'll see if the Champaign County state's well, I guess it's called the district attorney, city attorney there, can, apparently she has been reluctant to move forward, but I guess she's agreed to do so. They apparently don't have a grand jury or the ability to impanel a grand jury. So we'll have to see whether the city attorney is up for this task. Maybe if it's a rape and it was covered up, maybe you could make an argument there was a federal denial of civil rights, what's known as Section 1983 of the Federal Code violation, which would then get maybe the central, the U.S. attorney from the central district.
Let's not get too much into the legal weeds. The thing is, what's going to happen...
Well, you need somebody to invest. Okay, Terry, you need somebody with the authority to investigate it well, because you can't rely on Mike Madigan or his fellow Democrats to do it.
What's happening, and I want to pass this along quickly. We had a column come out, I believe this just came out as we taped this on the 10th of January, came out today by Greg Heinz of Crain's Chicago Business. And there we have it, Heinz, as part of his article, said, I don't know exactly what Mike Madigan knew or when he knew it, but there was no one closer to him than Mike McLean, the lobbyist, and Mapes, referring to Tim Mapes, who was Madigan's chief of staff. And we now know how they acted. Sleep with dogs and you get fleas. Shame on you, Mr. Speaker. It's time to go, according to Greg Heinz of Crain's Chicago Business.
So, yeah, there you go. I mean, Heinz is saying that Madigan, who's got enough troubles and deficiencies perhaps of his own, but Heinz is saying he's now infected, if you will. Speaker Madigan's infected with the deficiencies of Mike McLean's staff. Earlier in that column by Greg Heinz, he refers to Tim Mapes, the chief of staff, having a Democratic staffer complain to Mapes about a state rep, hitting on her and, obviously sexual harassment. And Mapes responding not with, well, what can I do? Let's get that guy. Similarly to this current incident, Mapes apparently said, or is reported to have said, what's the matter? Are you upset that the state rep wasn't interested in you? Okay. I mean, that's like something you might say in 1890, but not apparently, as was said, say, in 2017 or 18. So what the hell? What world was Tim Mapes living in to say that, to anybody? It's not like he whispered in an email. And the same thing, this was only 7 years ago. It wasn't that far ago, but it was a while. 2012, July 31, 2012 is when this email was written by Mike McLean. And these are the people who are closest. That's what Heinz' point, closest to Mike Madigan, or at least two of the very close people, confidants, Mike McLean.
And let's refocus here. So the thing is, this email came out just the other day and has really caused a whole storm. We don't know what rape he's referring to, but it comes in the context of a larger investigation that's going on, apparently by the feds, of what's going on with ComEd lobbying, and McLean was a lobbyist for ComEd. They're looking at, we had Ann Pramaggiore, the former head of ComEd in Chicago, has left. We had Jay Doherty, who was a lobbyist for ComEd, left as president of the City Club. We had Martin Sandoval recently resigned. We don't know why. What's behind all that? Resigned from the state senate. We had Representative Arroyo resign. Terry Link allegedly was carrying an email or a wire for the feds. So it's we are in the season of scandal and the season of ongoing political intrigue, Jeff, relative to this email now. And I would say, let me ask, can Speaker Madigan, the longest serving speaker in the history of the United States, can he last out the year? The people I've talked to think that certainly by about a year from now, after the legislature, that Madigan will no longer be the Speaker of the House. They think he cannot be elected again. When you look at the women members of the Democratic caucus, as well as the male members, how do you vote for a guy who apparently had a team of people, even though the Speaker says he knew nothing about this, nothing about the email, doesn't know what he's referring to, McLean's referring to about the rape, But how do you get these representatives to vote to make him speaker once again when you get this kind of details coming out? And it certainly doesn't look good for the team that he had together.
Well, as you point out, an ongoing, massive federal investigation. Not all of it, but a very large chunk of it appears to relate to, based on the subpoenas and the information they're looking for, based on the leaks that have come out through WBEZ radio, AM, FM, 91.5 FM here in Chicago, and the Chicago Tribune, and in Crain's. What do we see emerging from that? These allegations about essentially ComEd funneling money through others, apparently illicitly, large chunks of money to people for favors. According to, the reports, the leaks, it was $3 million or so going to Jay Doherty, former head of the City Club of Chicago. And again, the leaks suggest he was funneling it to others for God knows what. Mike McLean, again, the leaks and allegations suggest the same thing, funneling money around for gosh knows what, but it relates to ComEd. So it sounds like to some, me and perhaps others, as a potential RICO violation or allegation by the U.S. Attorney.
All right, well, let's just move along because we're going to follow up on this, but if you had a closing line, go ahead, otherwise let's move on.
Well, just to say, the other part of that is Mike Madigan has been head of the Illinois Democratic Party and Speaker of the House for, gosh, as long as we can remember, basically 3 decades. So there's a big organization there called the Illinois Democratic Party, run in large part by McLean. ComEd, very influential. Exelon, very influential. So there's a lot here. Again, it's speculation and leaks, but it could.
Okay, so we're going to have to learn more. We don't have anything else, no more meat on the bone, I think, here. Let's move along to the other big story, and this is just the 10th of January, when I will tell people with the legislature out, it's supposed to be a quiet time. But as we all know now, legalized marijuana came out on January 1st, and they had quite a early day. Over $3 million were sold. The following day, Toy Hutchison, former state senator who was one of the people instrumental in getting the bill to make recreational use of marijuana legal, came out and talked to reporters on day 2 and had a couple of comments. Let's listen to what she had to say.
All of these phases work together. The initial operators fund the loan program, which then goes to the equity applicants. The initial sales fund the R3 program, which goes to community reinvestment. And before the law even became active yesterday, we've already begun expunging thousands of cannabis records. So this is designed to work in tandem with each other in a very intentional way that's very unlike any other state that's attempted it.
So as we saw in the graphic, over $3 million sold in the first day. In fact, the sales were so strong that some of the distribution centers had run out of product to sell. And again, this is just 10 days into the legal form. We'll have to see how well what Toy Hutchison was talking about, trying to have an equity position for some of these communities where they get distribution centers, where some of the money generated from the sale of recreational marijuana goes back in to help those communities that she says that were the most damaged by the war on drugs. Well, we'll have to see, but Toy Hutchison said that her office has been contacted by some other states who are interested to see how Illinois has created this equity position for the poorer neighborhoods around the state. And these other states are looking to emulate, apparently, Illinois' approach to making recreational use of marijuana legal.
Okay, well, Illinois is the 11th state to legalize recreational marijuana. But the history in the other states is it starts like a big thing and it kind of tails off from there. So it'll have some impact. There'll be some impact on tax revenue, both on the local level and on the state level, but it is not a major factor. That's my prediction, okay? Not a major factor in solving the state's economic problems. And it's once people settle down, look, they're all forms of entertainment. There's gambling as a form of entertainment. There's going to a theater. There's going to a movie. There's going to a sporting event. There's having a nice dinner and passing a joint around with your friends. That's a new and novel bit of entertainment, but it's not going to dramatically affect the state's tax coffers. It's not going to dramatically affect the lifestyle. It's time to move on. I'm ready, Terry. Next topic.
Well, Jeff, the Senate of the Illinois Senate is going to have a new president. As we mentioned, John Cullerton, who's been the president since around 2009, is resigned. He's leaving after 41 years in state government, in the House first and a long time in the Senate. He's finally going on, is going to be looking into retirement. But now we're going to be looking at some other candidates, and it seems to come down to 3 candidates. Let's take a look at those. And we have on the left there, Senator Kimberly Lightford. In the middle, Senator L.G. Sims, who, by the way, is a former police officer in his past career. And Don Harmon, who's long-term been one of the big powers in the Illinois State Senate. How do you rate this race, Jeff? It's the vote is going to be on January the 19th.
Well, what do you need to become Senate president? The vote is by the full Senate. There are 59 state senators. So look, you need 30 votes, okay, to become of the Senate caucus, if you count Democrats and Republicans. And that's the magic number. Now, the first thing you'll have, and that election will be on January 19th, which is on a Sunday. But before the Senate meets in its entirety, all 59 members to vote, the Democrats will huddle. That is the Democratic Senate caucus, of which you have 40, but 2 are out because Cullerton won't be voting. And who else is out? Just blanking. Oh, I guess what they're missing is Senate because he resigned. And so you only have 38 votes. And of the 38, so you need 20 or so to get to 30. Eventually, they're going to leave that caucus with an agreement that there are 30 Democrats because they're not going to want any Republicans to have anything to do with that vote. So they will get to 30. How do you get to 30? Well, you start accumulating votes. And right now, you know, Lightford probably has got 15. That's what she had a few weeks ago. She's got Andy Menard supporting her from downstate. She's got Heather Staines, who's an important senator right there, and she's got a bunch of others. Harmon, we don't know. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe 5. And
So who's your pick? Give me the name. Who's going to be the next Senate president?
The odds-on favorite is obviously Senator Lightford from Maywood, which is a western suburb here in Chicago. But Harmon still has got a shot, and there could be a 4th person. You know, somebody else could come in all of a sudden.
Well, I suppose if we had a deadlock and then we'd move down, and then in that case, maybe Andy Menard, who's a former chief of staff to John Cullerton. But I'm going to say Kim Lightford is probably going to be the next Senate president.
But you know, Terry, here again, the important thing is not the horse race. Does it matter? Okay. Is there anything here?
Yeah, it does matter.
Well, does it really? How will pensions be affected, Terry? How will what we do about pensions?
Everything will be impacted. I'll answer your question. Everything will be impacted because you're going to have the powers of the Senate president and controlling the agenda on the floor by whoever is that Senate president. Also, as far as appointing people to different committees. So you can move legislation, you can block legislation, you have a lot of powers. How is it going to be affected? Well, because you're not going to get these policies passed if you have a Senate president that wants to block things. That's how. But let's move along. We'll follow up on that, maybe obviously coming up in the near future. Another big issue, and as we see above here, both the talk about impeachment and the attack in Iran. And as we tape this earlier today, everyone knows Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the U.S. House Speaker, after saying that they had to impeach the president post haste because it was an emergency, then sat on the articles of impeachment and have not sent them over to the Senate. Now apparently she has decided that she'll send those articles of impeachment over to the Senate, I believe, perhaps on Monday. Is that what you hear?
Tuesday. Well, look, here's what's going to happen. We're taping this on January 10th.
On Friday.
People hopefully will be at January 10th. They may be seeing it very soon, maybe even on the 10th. Next week, she'll send them. The Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives will meet next Tuesday. That's the 14th. She may send it over the 14th and 15th. Take a day or two of logistics. Then we're into Martin Luther King Day on the 20th. But the week of the 20th will probably be the start and maybe the end of the trial in the Senate. Look for a good, quick, short trial with no witnesses, and they move on. That's my prediction.
Before we run out of time, I want to move on to the president spoke, and this was obviously the big thing. We had a showdown with Iran. The president's supporters say how he handled it very well. And in an interview that will be aired this evening, an interview he did with Fox News reporter Laura Ingraham, our news talk show host, I should say, Laura Ingraham, he tells her that General Soleimani, who was killed by a missile attack that we caught him on the road from the airport in Baghdad going into the city, that he had plans to attack 4 American embassies. We don't know which 4, but let's listen to a bit of the president's comment at a press conference today, the day after Soleimani was taken out, I believe.
At my direction, the United States military eliminated the world's top terrorist, Qasem Soleimani. He trained terrorist armies, including Hezbollah, launching terrorist strikes against civilian targets. He fueled bloody civil wars all across the region. He viciously wounded and murdered thousands of U.S. troops, including the planting of roadside bombs that maim and dismember their victims.
And so, Jeff, what I think is not only is this an issue for foreign affairs, obviously, but the thing is how the president handled this will influence, I think, obviously the voting public. And we have the presidential election this year, so it's something for the Democrats to, I suppose, try to spin it in their direction, while the Republicans are trying to say this is an example of good leadership.
Here's the question. Was the president legitimate in taking out Soleimani? Okay? Was it? I mean, we know Obama had a target list of individuals. He was fast on the drones. He liked to use drones, okay? And he used them. And nobody complained about it. It was fine when Obama did it. Trump takes out the major terrorists coming out of Iran, somebody who's operating throughout the Middle East, imposing costs on hundreds of American lives in our treasury. And suddenly it's like, okay, he's declaring war on Iraq? What? Because he took out a major guy? Oh, he's a diplomat? He's a terrorist. Obama put him there. I mean, what the hell is going on here, Terry? Does that make sense to you?
Well, it's what I was shocked at, and people may not care how I reacted, but a lot of people also around the country had commented how they were shocked to the extent that many leading Democratic political figures were taking the argument that this was a bad thing, that the president acted, that he should have consulted with Congress first. Look, the president has the powers as the commander-in-chief to act. This was not a declaration of war. It was Soleimani who had already attacked our embassy. He had been responsible for killing a contractor in Iraq earlier in the week. As I said, Laura Ingraham reports in her interview, the president tells her that he was going to attack 4 more embassy, and this is what the... Yeah, we do have to get out here, but the point is, this is all going to play into national politics, who controls the House, who gets elected president. So beyond the specific issues, these are important.
Okay. To impeach the president, the Democrats would need 67 votes. They'll be lucky if they can get 45 of the 47 Democrats to vote for them. To change the rules for witnesses, they would need 51 votes. They'll be lucky if, again, they can keep their 47 together.
And Jeff, it's that magic time where, again, we got to say goodbye, but we'll be back next week.